Some folks will like you and some that just won't. Some that stay real and some that just don't. Trying to fit in will only take you so far. You'll never find home trying to change who you are. So don't spend your whole life trying to be what you ain't. You can't hide your heart with a new coat of paint. You think they'll accept you, I promise they can't. It's just be who you are, forget what they think. So just be who you are and forget what they think.
Welcome to Vet with a Mic, content driven by veterans issues. So today we're talking to a former Marine by the name of Adrian, who has found his life after the uniform, just a really profound story of just helping veterans within the mental health space. He is the founder of the Sheepdog Program, which is out of Florida, that tailors their needs directly to the military population and law enforcement and first responders. So Adrian, man, how you been, buddy?
Doing good, brother. This is exciting.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We are happy to have you here. I know that whenever we talked a couple weeks ago now, you told me that you had some pretty big speaking engagements that obviously COVID had kind of canceled on you.
Yeah. Those. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, I think it's the world has a way of helping you take a knee and relax when needed. But I'm supposed to be at Sundance right now, and plan to do a couple panels and to host some booths out there. And then they decided to cancel the entire in-person part of it. So that's where I would have been talking to you from Utah if it wasn't for that. But I'm still down in Florida, which I can't complain about because I do not like the cold.
Oh yeah, here in Nashville, it is a bitterly cold day today. But I kind of am a little happy that you were able to do it with us here. But obviously, we're no Sundance film festival. But we appreciate you being here, man. So let's talk a little bit about your life in the uniform, because you did some really high speed stuff that a lot of people listening may go, oh shit, man, he's one of those guys, right?
That's cool, man. It's humbling. I mean, yes, I got the blessing to. So I joined in 2000. I started my first tour. I was infantry, but my first tour was over at Kings Bay, Georgia Security Forces. So I was already in uniform when the towers fell, and when it was time to rotate back to the infantry, I saw that Recon poster on the wall, and I was like, who are those guys? And everyone was like, you don't want to do that. Those guys are nuts. And I was like, that's what I want to go do. So I remember calling up Recon Battalion, and they said, like, if you could find 14 guys willing to take the in-doc, we'll come down there and we'll give you guys the screening. I found 3 that wanted to do it, and then like another 11 that would just like lie and pretend and then quit as soon as we started. So I told them I had my 14 guys. They came down to give us the in-doc. First question is like, who doesn't want to be here? Like 11 guys raised their hand. They're like, well played. So they gave us still the screening, and me and one of my buddies, we made it. We went to Recon Battalion. I was with Recon Battalion through Fallujah time frame, and then I came back, went to Force Recon, and I was with Force until in 2006 when Rumsfeld started Marine Special Operations Command. I was with that Force Recon platoon from second that turned into the first second Force or second Marine Special Operations Battalion platoon, and then I spent the rest of my time with the Marine Raiders until I got medically retired in about 2016. So one too many concussions, one too many blasts. I ended up going to become a patient at Wounded Warrior Regiment, and that's where I finished my career.
Yeah. Now, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I mean, they see this on the Sheepdog Program's website as well, but you are also a Purple Heart recipient, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've definitely paid in full your time in the uniform. I just wanted to frame that for everybody listening, because number one, a lot of people think they understand about what it takes to do the kind of taskings that you just described, but it really does take just an internal drive that most of us can't really comprehend. Like just this last episode, I talked to Mark, who climbed Mount Everest. And so we kind of tried to get into the headspace of what type of person it would take to look at that big mountain and go, yeah, I can do that. So being in that type of operations, it's similar mentality. It's a similar drive. It takes a certain type of personality to get through the training that you just described. So let's talk about, what year did you get out then? You said that was
2016.
2016. How did you find the transition?
It was not easy, man. I mean, it kind of put me in the direction of the path that made me become a mental health counselor today. I'd already gotten my bachelor's in psychology when I was while I was still in uniform, and one day I woke up and I just had a hard time even just like getting dressed. Like I'm sitting there staring at my clothes, and I'm like, first pants, then shoes, and on top of that, I started to have some pains and issues. Like I was painting my house one day, and couldn't hold the paintbrush anymore. Like it fell out of my hand, and every time I would go in to get checked out by our medical team, they would always tell me it was something else. At one point in time I was having hip pain, and they told me I had like weak hip flexors, but like a week before that, they were yelling at me for making the kids do too many flutter kicks at our schoolhouse. Anything that was going on up here, like the confusion and the cloudiness, they're like, that's probably because of, just the shit you've been through, or the divorce that you've had, or this or that. Like, there's probably some mental health issue stuff, But then there was one day where I woke up and I could like feel the back of my eye. Like as I was looking around, it was like there was a pressure in the back of my eyes. When I went in for that, they were like, hey, we're worried you might have some kind of a growth back there or something. So I went in for an orbital imaging scan. They go, okay, you don't have a tumor, which is good, but hey, we saw part of your brain, and we want to do a brain scan. Then the eye thing was, so much overpressure had like ruptured my sinuses, so I was like capturing air behind my eyes. So they kind of like taught me how to like fart out of my tear duct in a way, like kind of let that air out. But they said, hey, we want to do a brain scan. So I did the brain scan, and they came back and they said, hey, you got langular lesions all over your brain. Like this is probably part of the reason why you're having some vision issues as well. There's one of those tears in your orbital tract. But hey, we also saw part of your neck, so let's do a neck scan. So they did a scan of my neck, and they go, hey, you got 4 compressed discs, 2 have ruptured, and they're pinching off your spinal column. You're like pretty much a moderate tackle away from paralysis. Like I could like kick you and probably put you down right now. At the same time, MARSOC was like, you have a deployment coming up. You're heading out as a team chief. You're going to be out the door in just a few months. And thankfully, I had one master guns that kind of like just put the kibosh on it. And he's like, between some of my friends and him and I talking, they're like, you haven't gone on a deployment where you haven't been rocked really, well, at least once. There's a good chance that it's going to happen again. And with your neck being the way that it is, you're probably not going to make it then. I mean, if you're one tackle away from paralysis, you're probably not going to make it. So they got master guns to put my my packet to go up to Wounded Warrior Regiment. And the way that works is like once they look at your packet and they approve you to be a patient, like they get you. So like the greater MARSOC command can't say anything about it. You become their patient. They get to take you away. And the 30 days as a 30-day TAD or PTAD or TAD when you're down there, I got the doctors in my ear, and they're talking to me about like all my conditions and my issues and the surgeries that I'm gonna need. And they finally did some scans on my hips, and they saw that I still had like shrapnel in my leg. I had a torn labrum on they did one side scan. They saw the torn labrum with bone spurs, and they said, hey, we didn't even scan the other one to put the contrast in there, but you got a torn labrum on the other side too. Long of the short of that, when MARSOC called up and they said, hey, your 30 days is up, you're either, you got to come back, or you got like 2 months before you're taking this team out. I was like, hey, I got surgery scheduled like next week. And the answer was, well, we're not getting another master sergeant on our books until you're off our books. So, peace. We're going to go ahead and just send you out there to go get medically retired. Take it easy. Have a good one. Don't forget to turn your shit in, type of a thing. Yeah. And that punted me in the chest with like this intense, just like, feeling of abandonment. Like that's when I started dealing with anxiety and depression and other issues. Like in my mind, I had given them, my body, because here I am getting all patched up again. My first marriage, my relationship with my only child at the time. Like I've given them so much of myself, and when I couldn't be there for them to take these people on this deployment, they just said, we're done with you. Take it easy. Yeah. There was an opportunity. SOCOM said, hey, you can come to our schoolhouse and teach with us down here. We can do this, we can do that. But battalion was like, no, you're going out on this deployment. You can get fixed when you get back. And I had to finally just accept, like, am I willing to risk not being able to play with my kids again afterwards.
Right.
I just needed time to get better. So anyway, I became a patient, and I had to go through all the the surgeries. And as I was going through that process, then they sent me into speech therapy to work on some TBI work, and then I started to go see mental health to start working on things. And that's, like I mentioned, dealing with the depression, the anxiety, just like that feeling of abandonment and loss. My team was gone. I didn't get like the hail and farewell paddle party that everybody gets. I just really felt left. I was down. I was even down at the Tampa detachment of Wounded Warrior Regiment instead of up in North Carolina, because that's where my family was. I was a single master sergeant at the time, and they're like, when you get surgery, you need someone there to take care of you. So be closer to your family, because they had all moved down here. But going through the process and working with all those counselors, that's when I started to recognize, where my calling brought me to today. Dealing with them, dealt with like a bunch of therapists who had that wealth of knowledge and all that understanding, all that book knowledge, but they just didn't get us. They didn't get our way of life and where we come from and how we think. And they're doing their best, but they just didn't understand that warrior ethos. They couldn't understand some of the things that we've been through, and they would hyper focus on the wrong things instead of the things that were really, getting to me.
Something that you said there, because separation or the transition, generally speaking, is ostracizing, because you just feel that you lose all this social support from the uniform. And to your point, regardless of whether they've got all this invested in you or not, when the military's done with you, their attitude shifts towards you. They're just like, meh, see ya. And no matter what your job is, I think people feel that, and that intensifies the frustration of transition, because you just realize how disposable you are at that point, and the machine just keeps on going without you.
Absolutely.
And I went on an interview just the other week with the Brave and Faithful podcast, and you guys have a shared interest. He's an FMF corpsman, so he was embedded with the Marines in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I shared something that you talked to me about just the other week, about how mental health professionals not getting us, as you just described, and how they may fixate on things that they think are points of trauma for us, but are not. And we discussed that a little bit on that podcast. Could you go into it a little bit for everybody listening? Because I want to just say, a therapeutic relationship is a relationship, and sometimes you're not going to have the same connection with a therapist that you may hope for. And that doesn't mean that you're a failure as a client or as a patient, just because the person may not understand you as well as you would like.
No, 100%. that at the end of the day, that's what brought me to this path. I wanted to become the type of therapist, or as closely as I could, that I wish I had when I was going through the process as well too. So, when you look at it and look at some of the statistics, like the majority of therapists is like, 74% of them are female, first off, and then like a very small amount of them that are male. Most of them start their career when they're like, 24 years old. The average median age of a therapist is like in their early 40s. So not many of them have ever walked this type of a life at any point in time. So, you have people that are trying to give you clinical reflection and observations into your life, but their entire walk has been somewhat different, not to throw too much shade at anybody, but I'd have therapists that are sitting there, and there's the dude with the ponytail and he got the patches on his tweed jacket, and he's like trying to like tell me what I should be focused on and like what I'm having such a problem with. And I'm like, you don't look like you've sweat a day in your entire life. Like, right. what have you done that like helps you understand like what we've been through, what we're talking about? And they'd always go to the big sexy missions or stories, or like they want those stories like, there I was, in the middle of Fallujah, up to my knees in brass, or there I was on that sniper mission. Like, let's go back to this raid, or let's go back to that.
The index event. Yeah.
And to them, like, they couldn't. It's the same thing I feel a lot when I'm working with first responders. The law enforcement officer that had to pull his weapon out. He's talking to a therapist who's like, you must be traumatized because you probably feel the pistol grip in your hand all the time from pulling your weapons. Like, no, I'm very conditioned, very trained to do that.
Yeah.
Like in our job, like we were going out as like, as an assault force, or in this mission, we're like a small team in the middle of nowhere doing a whole spread of operations. Like if we weren't engaged, or if we weren't active, I'd be really frustrated because I spent a lot of time getting out there. But for a therapist who's never walked that life, I mean, they have a difficult time sometimes conceptualizing or perceiving like what it would look like to be okay with pulling the trigger, to be okay with being in a firefight. I mean, not that they're like, okay or enjoyable, but they can't understand that wasn't what I was getting stuck with, or what some of us get stuck with. That's not the piece.
Yeah. Or not being able to pull the trigger whenever you feel with every bone of fiber of your being that you should have, but because of some arbitrary rule set, we're not allowed to. Those things are things that we take into the mental health space with us that you're right, a lot of providers don't understand. And in my clinical psychology training, I largely wanted to avoid working with veterans issues because I knew, number one, that our culture was very specific, and we're kind of once bitten, twice shy about talking about these things. We don't really like to wade into some of our more painful content or feel vulnerable, generally speaking. But I had a negative interaction with a provider at the VA, in which that she asked me not to use profanity in the session.
Oh boy.
And which I just went, holy shit, Ben, you really don't get us. Like we have acronyms built in around profanity. This is something that you really are just culturally incompetent, and you work with the VA or within the veteran space. So it shifted my trajectory completely. I went, well, hell, if not me, then who? I have to go back into the fray then, because I know how this stuff is supposed to work, and I understand our culture. Yeah,
man. I mean, I don't know how many times we're allowed to curse on your guys' shows, but like,
no worries, man. Let them fly.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, like, I've had therapists that have said, like, he's dropping the F-bomb too much, or please don't curse don't curse in our groups. I'm like, you can't tell them not to curse. Like, let them curse. That might be the best way that they know how to express that emotion. And you know what? By letting them let it fly, like, let them say like that, fuck that motherfucking fuckity fuck. Like, let them get it out there, because that's the only way they know how to explain it right now. And by letting them exercise that, they're going to learn more words, better words to start to replace it by going through that process. Like, you telling them not to curse is like me telling you not to speak with conjunctions. It's just it's just the way that we naturally communicate. You gotta let them communicate in their native language. We understand that if Spanish is your first language, like you're going to do therapy better in Spanish, speak in your native tongue, and you're going to be able to process better. And if just profanity is part of your native tongue, let them utilize that, let them express that, and then they'll learn to eventually have a better, deeper understanding of those emotions, and they'll be able to share a lot more, to get a lot deeper into it. And we're limiting their ability to explore their emotional state by doing that.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I felt judged, like that. Some arbitrary word use. Like, it's hard enough for me to communicate what the hell's going on with me without you trying to censor my language on top of it. It's just, especially it's really difficult to, of course, you're familiar with the feelings wheel. That's the reason why we give people those, so that they can accurately identify the feelings because it's hard to search for the word in the moment. Right. So let me ask you though, did you have, were you just all in on working with veterans, or did you have the same kind of ambivalence that I did?
No, I think you're right on the money. I had the same kind of like hesitation at first. I mean, I had a heart to help. I wanted to work with everyone, really. I wasn't really hesitant, but I wasn't excited to work with veterans. So when I got out, my first job after the military, I actually worked for this DOD NASA unit, which was like, so I was actually the astronaut survival and personnel recovery office for a while, which was like fun, nice and sexy job, especially when they were starting the human space flight program again, get to go work with NASA and SpaceX and Boeing and all those guys. Like, my heart kept getting pulled in this direction. I was going to grad school to finish it. And like, I wanted to come back and be a therapist. I started off with just like general practice, working with like all different types of people, but there was just something about like So where we are at across the river is Patrick Air Force Base. There's a PJ unit that's right over there, and I was working for a psychologist that had been in it for decades, and he had a couple clients that like they just couldn't get along. They just there was some PJs that are like cursing and wanting to flip over a desk and screaming and wanting to come out, and I could hear him, and I was like, give them to me. He's hesitant because I'm still young in this profession. I'm like, no, you don't get it. Like, give them to me.
Yeah.
So he finally paired me up with one of them, and he stands outside the door all sheepishly, like nervous, and he hears like the cursing and the stomping and the the brouhahaing, and the guy comes out of the office. He's like, where the fuck you been keeping this guy? Like, I want to work with him. He's like, screw you, dude. I want this guy from now on. He's like, it was just our ability to communicate was different. And as that progressed, I realized that I was doing myself an injustice and the people that I could possibly work with an injustice, because like to our earlier point, like some of these therapists, they get hyper fixated on the big sexies, on those those events, those main events, and they don't realize that it's not that we're get stuck on. It's the I didn't get to pull the trigger, or like or that I saw this, or what happened to that kid in the corner, or that thing that I observed that I had no training for. Like I was ready to set a charge, reach the door, go in. He goes left, I go right. Looks how to stack on the hallway, how to go down and clear.
Yeah.
That was, for the most part, not as much of an issue. A lot of guys have a couple issues with their first few, then they kind of go like, numb to it for a while. Then there's that one that breaks the camel's back at the end.
Yeah.
But things that really seem to have that long-lasting effect are those little events that people aren't expecting to have to see. There's no training for that. Like when you go in and you have to observe or respond to or address, deal with that thing associated with the job that you were never prepared to have your eyes and your brain stamp that memory together, or or that significant moral injury, like when you feel that the unit, the command, this fraternity, this organization that you've dedicated so much of yourself to, stabs you in the back, doesn't really care about you, fails you, and you don't have the words or the understanding to really put together like why it hurts so bad.
So let me ask you something, because this comes up quite a bit on Vet with a Mic. Is civilians have this unrealistic understanding of what military service is like, and we've talked about this before. 85% of the uniform is not in combat arms. Only about 15% carry a rifle in the performance of their duty every day, like you and I, although yours was a much more higher frequency than me. And only about 15% of that 15% have combat experiences and the ways in which we conceive them largely. So when you're doing the Sheepdog program and you're trying to breach the divide between the everyday veteran who looks at you and goes, holy shit, man, you were Force Recon? Like how am I'm intimidated by you now because you've had all these experiences, and maybe I feel like a piece of shit because I'm feeling like useless, and because I didn't have the same uniform experiences that you do. Like who am I to feel bad about my life compared to you? Is that something that ever resonates within the Sheepdog program, or is that something that you guys focus in on?
Yeah, man, like all the time. But I mean, even with where I've been and who I've served with, there's people that have done so much more. There's always a measuring contest, if you will, that could happen. The thing is, it has much less to do with who you were attached to. Because I mean, for myself, the things that bother me are that I've had to work on were not what many would expect to be. It wasn't, like I said, the big, sexy, flashy, bangy type of operational stuff. It was the nuanced little things that I wasn't expecting to see or to have to deal with.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the whole sheepdog construct, like there are those of us that are out there that have chosen to step outside of the flock. They will stand away from the herd and they'll stare into the shadows and look the wolf in the eye, and they will keep the wolf at bay. But when you do that, what you're doing is you are transferring, like the sheep have the blessing, the privilege of being able to stay innocent, and they can bleat and blah and chew their grass and enjoy life because they think things are safe.
Yeah.
When you stare into the eyes of the wolf, you are exchanging your innocence for some of that darkness of how raw and how savage and how violent the world really is out there.
How very Nietzschean of you. Yeah.
Once you do that, man, you can never unsee that. You can never go back to being a sheep again, you know?
Yeah.
So you are forever a sheepdog. And that's the last thing that those recruiters didn't understand, because most of them didn't get it themselves, or they weren't done with it themselves too. But like, once you're done, how do you go back and live amongst the sheep in this world that you've sacrificed part of yourself to preserve, without telling the sheep how sharp the wolf's teeth are every day, or without letting that understanding tear you apart and eat you apart from the inside?
So I'm so glad that you brought up this metaphor, because I was just talking with somebody a little earlier today about it. Because to me, not only are you no longer a sheep, you transform yourself into a wolf. You're a domesticated wolf. That's what a dog is. So now you understand the what it takes, what the predatory mindset is of the wolf. And it's really hard to go back into amongst the sheep, because you're forever a different animal. You're not going back to it. And that really does drive home the point that you're making, is you're forever changed. Don't expect to ever be a sheep again. Become something different, become something new. And that's where we really harp on the veteran identity, is accepting that you're different. You're never going to be able to go back to Kansas and connect with people the same way that you did before. Your experiences are a paradigm shift. Your worldview has changed.
Yeah.
Just and become this new thing that is a little bit wolf, a little bit sheep, but is the veteran, right?
And there's a place for it to fit into our society. I mean, like, I've heard that same analogy going, like, you know, the sheepdog turns into the wolfhound, and like, you know, it keeps on like progressing depending on like, you know, who's telling the story. But you're absolutely right. Now, when you come back, your job as a sheepdog doesn't stop. I mean, it's just it's reframed, it's rephrased. Like, so many veterans don't realize that they are like a nuclear reactor in a world of AA batteries. Like, if they could just learn how to, if we could help them, if they could figure out how to wire themselves into the grid, they can empower their families, the community around them, get great things done. Or like a nuclear reactor, if they don't learn how to, they can melt down and take out everyone around them too.
So before we started recording, you made a Jungian reference about the shadow side and doing shadow work, right? And this just came up at least a couple of times on the podcast as well, because we need to embrace, to your point, this animalistic side of us as well, this darker part of us, the predatory drive. We have the ability, most of us, because we joined the armed forces, to use violence against another human being. That doesn't mean that you're less than human, but it's just it's a part of you, a part of you that is as vital to you as your right hand or your left hand. To deny it is to do yourself a great disservice. So could you expand a little bit or unpack that shadow work that you're doing here with the Sheepdog program?
Okay, yeah. So we have a, you know, kind of an eclectic approach bringing it together. I mean, some of our curriculum, we're going to be taking everything from like, you know, existential philosophy with some like Rogerian constructs, and then a lot of Jungian framework of the psyche, and bring it together. So like, you have a lot of understanding of like, you know, in your phenomenological experience, you know, from the existential school, like these are the things that you've experienced in life, and what's happened to you in life is important, but just as important is the order in which they have happened. Because each one of these, you know, these clusters or these pinpoints or these moments or events, you have had things happen to you which has changed your perspective in life. When your perspective changes, when your morals, values, ideals, and beliefs are shifted, that means, like, in order for them to have shifted, you very likely have lost or repressed or changed another part of yourself as well too. And there's some key moments in this timeline that we work on inside of the program, where we'll recognize, you know, but now to the Jungian side, we would recognize that your ego mechanism archetype has basically said, whatever just happened there, I didn't like that. That didn't make me feel comfortable. That made me feel rejected or like, ostracized or humiliated. Let's never have that happen again. What was that in me that made me feel that way? It was, my artistic nature, or it was my ability to assert myself. It was my voice, whatever it was. I spoke out too much. Your ego archetype like cuts that part of you away, and it just like throws it away. It's not gone though. You can't get rid of or totally destroy any part of your psyche. It just goes into this kingdom of the unknown.
Yeah.
Where it has the ability to grow to immeasurable shapes and sizes. And that's like the shadow realm. So like, if we're talking right now, right, and my son were to burst through that door and he's like, look, Daddy, I'm a dinosaur. Rawr, rawr, I'm a dinosaur. And I'm like, kid, get out of here, man. Like, get the hell. Hey, I'm sorry, guys. My kid thinks he's a freaking dinosaur. Get out of here. You're embarrassing us, And he walks out. We keep on talking, We might even laugh at it, but that kid's experience, like how he took that through his eye holes into his consciousness, his ego saying like, ow, that hurt.
Yeah.
Feel that again. Like that made me feel humiliated, rejected, unloved, unwanted. Like what made me do that? And it was like his assertiveness, So like the ego, it could be that one event, it could be accumulation of events. The ego says, you know what, we can't do this anymore. We can't be that anymore. We got to get rid of that part of ourselves. So it like cuts away that kid's assertiveness and it puts it away. Now it's never gone. But let's say I'm talking about my 5-year-old son, right? His assertiveness is like this feral 5-year-old child that got thrown into the woods, into the wilderness, and it never gets a chance to mature with the rest of the child, the child's psyche, his ego state, or his development. So, that kid, let's just say he's like, becomes mild-mannered, repressed, quiet, timid even. He could become valedictorian of his school, right? Like, and he's just this timid kid who like doesn't speak out too much, isn't too aggressive. But now, he goes to his first kegger, or he turns 21, right? And now he starts drinking. Well, alcohol, what does it do to your frontal lobe?
And turns him off. Yeah.
It anesthetizes that.
Yeah.
These learned behaviors, all of these experiences that you had, where the ego is like kind of like running this megazord, it kind of gets powered down. And that shadow construct of yourself that's been this wild feral child living in the jungle for a long time is like, no one's at the
gate. Here's my time. Yeah.
And it burst on through. So like now that quiet, timid kid is like trying to fight everybody.
A rage monster. Yeah.
He's like, are you listening to me? Are you listening to me? He wants to like fight whoever's out there. He's taking his shirt off to Guns N' Roses. He's like trying to like stage dive, because that's a part of his personality. It's always been there. It's wanted to be engaged. It's wanted this time in the light. It's just never had the opportunity to come on through.
Yeah.
And this is also where our shadow mechanisms can kind of like hijack certain parts of us, hijack people's addictions, if you will, even like it knows I can only get out when that guard's asleep. I can only really exercise these other parts of myself when I have the freedom to do so. And it can even like hijack, substance use. So the person ends up drinking a lot more, exerting themselves a lot more. The person, the girl who's very passive and quiet, but she's like the funny, mean girl because there's a part of herself that she's repressed forever, starts drinking a little bit more because she needs to let that funny, mean side of her out, or she feels like she does. It's really something different, like that.
And
that person's letting out, that wasn't always violence. That was just assertiveness. But in that kingdom of the unknown, it got fed hate and fear and anger and violence and all that other stuff. So when it had a chance to manifest, it came out as rage.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. And it probably feels pretty good too, whenever that happens, whenever you're allowed to express that part of yourself. To your point, that's why you go, okay, well, this is what feels good about me being drunk or under the influence. I get to be a different version of myself. And I'm sure that feels, at least if nothing else, interesting intellectually. There's a certain curiosity to it, like, oh yeah, look, I got this other side of me. So
it starts that perpetual trap and cycle, because it's like that book Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? That was like a psychological thriller back in the day.
Right. Yeah.
Mr. Hyde came out and actually helped to remove some obstacles at first, but then left unchecked, destroyed his life and continued to destroy it, like, was taken off on his own. It starts off like, oh, it helps me in these social situations. It helps me talk to people. And the next thing you know, you're overdoing it, and you're getting overly aggressive or overly or obnoxious or blacking out, and like it's not a healthy way to reincorporate that aspect of yourself. That's what shadow work is, finding a healthy way to bring it back.
Right. Yeah. To integrate that part of you into a way that is controlled chaos, I guess it would be a way of framing it. So let's talk a little bit about more the stuff you're doing right now that is particularly interesting within, let's just say, alternative treatments at this point. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of research that's being done right now. I think I just saw an article a few weeks ago about these type of chemicals that you've been using to some extent and helping people explore this shadow side, or the shadow work that you called it. So can we talk a little bit about that? How did you first come into the psychotropic? I don't know what the correct word is to describe it.
No, you're right on the money. I mean, because there's so many different ways to approach it. So in different modalities, though, we bring in, like we mentioned, that humanistic, existential, Jungian. We do virtual reality exposure therapy, EMDR, like all these different ways of accessing these different points and places to work on. And still, there's sometimes where we just find that we are at this roadblock, or like the trauma and drama or abuse, be it physical or substance or emotional, of the past is just like wired that brain so tight in the wrong direction that we need, like, the person benefits from a little bit of help. So, within our medical practice, we have, ketamine treatments that we've been working with people. So ketamine IV drips, we have ketamine lozenges. That's been a really great way of almost like doing like a surgical tactical strike of utilizing like psychedelic medications to help. I mean, there's physiological benefits of it. We recommend that ketamine now increases the glutamine between the neuroreceptors, which helps increase the plasticity of the mind. Which, in layman's terms, means that your brain has a better capacity to choose different decisions or go down different pathways than they continue to fall down old pathways. But we've really overlaid a very intensive therapeutic guiding process on top of that as well too. So a lot of intention setting. There's, when they're doing their ketamine treatments, there's several of them where I'll be sitting in the room with them. If they're talking, we're guiding, we're going in a certain direction for things. We have key questions that we've discussed beforehand that we keep revisiting. So ketamine is the primary one that we do within our medical practice. Now, we've also worked with several organizations that have utilized ayahuasca. We sent somebody out not long ago to go on an ibogaine retreat. There's this psilocybin, there's MDMA, there's other medicines out there that, the research is growing. And I actually think that in the next few years, especially in Texas, being the leader, they're going to take this to the next level. But yeah, I think that we got a really great, a lot of growth to go in that direction. We're going to see a lot of things happening in the psychedelic realm, and as clinicians supporting it, we got to start to be able to provide a healthy framework of what direction we're going to be going in, and provide that.
So I just want to unpack something you just said there about neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is, in my opinion, one of the most wonderful things the brain does. And I think it's something that often gets overlooked, and it's your brain's ability to form new pathways, to reconnect parts of your brain that may have been subjected to damage, like, for example, a stroke. So whenever you're utilizing these approaches, and you said that it kind of increases the ability to utilize neuroplasticity. Do you guys use this for traumatic brain injuries, or is this something that has still just been a pillar of more the talk therapy approach?
So there's the research is growing for that, for using it for brain injury. Like, they are recognizing that it. So there's a study that we're looking at partnering or helping to participate in next year, where they want to take all of those medicines that we just discussed and
Mm,
take, individuals, put them through the ceremony or the clinical trials,
mm,
map the brain before and afterwards, and then actually
mm,
try to utilize like a TMS machine,
mm.
transmagnetic stimulation machine, to see if they can maintain the benefits that have been seen through the medicine work, utilizing TMS as well too. So like
Yeah.
we're recognizing that there's the pathways of the brain are just lighting up. Like there's just
Yeah.
ignition. Parts of the brain are talking that haven't been talking before
Mm,
or not for a long time,
yeah.
and trying to figure out how to maintain that. So that's really started to open the door up of like how to potentially help with any kind of disorder or damage that is caused physical damage to the brain. Can we start to regenerate neural connections?
Yeah. So I was trained in EMDR, right? And whenever I first went, I was a little, I won't say suspicious necessarily, but I was a little skeptical. And and so I was like, okay, this, there's the bilateral stimulations, things are moving around, like people are just moving there. And people naturally think of hypnosis when they see that. But then as you're practicing on each other, I felt things happening. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And it really opened up my mind to the idea of, holy shit, we have no idea what the hell really is happening with the brain. And, you know, uh, I think EMDR was first discovered, I guess would be the appropriate word to use, like in 1985. And since then, we know that it works specifically with trauma.
Mhm.
And the research compared to like something like cognitive behavioral therapy may be more limited, but we know it works. We just don't know why it works to the extent in which it does. And so I wanted to just say that from somebody who is also from the mental health perspective, from a different angle, that just because we don't understand why things necessarily work doesn't mean that we should be as suspicious of them or skeptical of them, because the brain is it's just an anomaly. It's a mystery to us largely because there's just so much that we're finding out about the brain every day.
Oh yeah, man, you're right on the money. I think like so. I like to do EMDR with people before they go to some of these medicine spaces, because I feel
Mm,
like that piece of letting loose and free associating, like
mm,
your job is not to do anything, but it's not to stop yourself from doing anything at the same time too, right?
yeah,
Like it's like that's very much needed in that psychedelic realm of therapy as well
yeah,
too. Like your job is not to do anything, but don't stop yourself from doing anything too. Just be present, let it happen, let yourself acknowledge the feelings, the sensations, the sights, the everything that you're experiencing, and then like with the MDR, we're just checking in, make sure they're processing. Like, what
yeah,
are you recognizing? Like, where are you at now? What are you recognizing? What are you seeing? Or where are you? Same thing with the on the other space as well. There's something going on in that. I mean,
mm,
there is this parallel, this thread that's connecting it all. But you're right. Like
yeah,
we may not be able to ever fully put our finger on the what, but something is happening. We know that it's happening right. That we got to
yeah,
do a better job of just continuing to track it, not being afraid to try new things.
mm,
Like we know that virtual reality exposure therapy works, but most of the people doing it are doing it under a grant, so they have to do it in this methodical process.
yeah, yeah.
The only thing
Very
that
limited. Yeah,
yeah, we know that this one works, but they're doing it in this way that they have to prove that there's no other variables, so it's very
mm,
limited. Programming that's out there. We can have a whole nother conversation on like how
yeah,
jacked up the whole like mangled healthcare process is.
yeah. Or just research in general. Yeah,
Yeah, and they know that like family sessions work. They know individual therapy works. They know that all these things work, but you're only going to get like one at a time. You're not going to get like, why are we not consolidating, like collaborating, doing this like full on approach? So we like, why are they not getting individual with family, with their EMDR, with their virtual reality exposure, with all of these approaches at the
yeah.
same time? Because we know they work. So why are we not giving them the best that we can give them?
Yeah. And to your point too, I think it was back in 2019, the APA released an article that said there's therapeutic gains no matter what the approach.
Yeah.
Like there's something to it, no matter clinical behavioral therapy may be the standard, but even psychodynamic or psychoanalytic still works. And to your point, what I kind of the trainer described EMDR to me, and I definitely felt this, was like a a putting dynamite into a garbage can. That's what it kind of felt like. It was just something happened. I felt an effect. It felt just like there was just something inside of me that I could barely contain. But it really opened up my idea or what I conceived Freud in too. Because to me, I was like, something's happened with psychic energy here. There was almost like a psychic splinter that is trauma, where it's not oriented in time. And as soon as you allow the brain, as soon as you pull that splinter out of the brain, there's the immune response can happen and everything else can get back to healing. And it was a paradigm shift for me within the mental health space, because like I was so constrained by, this is what we know works, CBT works, this is what we have to do. After that, I had a whole new approach, or a whole new appreciation for guys like Freud and Jung, because there's still a lot to be discovered.
Oh, there definitely is, man. I mean, like, Freud never hit his, like, appreciation of certain substances, like, and that kind of got him a lot of criticism.
He got stomped on cocaine. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he liked to do some lines with some horses and stuff like that, like, but, like sometimes when I'm looking at Jung's work and talking about, like, the archetypes, the anima, the animus, the collective unconsciousness, mandalas, how they represent the self. And like, then you explore the psychedelic modalities of healing, and like all of these components are there and echoed over and over again. Like the psychedelic therapies it's shadow work strapped to the nose cone of a rocket.
Yeah, that was the analogy or metaphor you used that I was trying to get to. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. So when we can, like, what brought it to my attention was, I mean, we've seen the ketamine stuff work before, but like, I've had some of those organizations come to me before, and like, it's religious freedom, so I let people practice what they want to practice as a state licensed facility. I don't get in the way of that. But I had an ex-client of ours that went through the Sheepdog Program, go to one of these organizations, go to an ayahuasca retreat, and like, these same guys have come and talked to me a few times, and he came in like literally kicking down my door, and he was like, everything we talked about, like that, the whole 6 months that I was with you, in like one weekend, and like, and it was because of your 6 months that it like all happened again in one weekend. He's like, and there's these guys that are going through, and they don't even know what they're experiencing, and they're kind of like lost afterwards. When I went through it, and I just got like so much out of it. So when somebody tells us that they want to go do this, when they want to go there, like, we will prep them with this Jungian work and helping them understand this guide work, and using the same type of framework of psychedelic therapeutic approaches that we use for ketamine, like kind of like overlaying it on top. They'll go do the retreat, they'll come back again, and they'll be like, holy cow, like that took me light years ahead in my therapeutic approach. That I've got so much, and there's some people that have been doing that medicine for years. We've had guys that have like my 34th, my 50th time of doing the medicine. Then they come to our program, they stay, like I say, hey, hands off of it for a while. You're here, we're doing the psychoeducational piece, we're getting into it, we're doing the hard work. Like, you're not relying on anything else. We'll get all of this framework in place, do the trauma timeline, do the EMDR stuff. And then they'll finally, at the end of it all, or like a month after they graduate, they'll tell us they'll want to go back. I'm like, tell us how it went. And they'll be like, that one time was more important than all 50 times that I've gone before put together, because I knew what I was doing and how to navigate it.
Yeah. Do you think it's just like all that prep work before you go into that?
I do, man. I think that our greater clinical community is terrified to, like, when I go there to check on somebody, or just to see what their organization's like, you see the therapist like hiding on the walls, like a spider in the corner. Like, they're like afraid to acknowledge that like there's something going on here that's working, but they're always visiting, they're always walking through, they're always checking it out. Like, it's if we could come together and help apply a theoretical, like a modality, like
some kind of framework. Yeah.
An actual framework, so that it's being done clinically and properly, and we can like help guide them through the process, integrate properly. Because if we don't, it gets lost in this, like, this stream of other alternative modalities that are just like not as clinical, and it's like, they kind of get, I mean, best of intentions, greatest of hearts, but like it's kind of like lost in that other stuff instead of like staying in the, hey, this is exactly like, I hear people telling their stories of what they're arguing or what they're fighting with, and like, oh wow, awesome, you just totally had an encounter with your animal. The same thing as you're doing like Jungian dream interpretive work is a lot of this work. Like that totally sounds like that. Hey, next time you go in there, try to embrace this, engage with that, talk with that, and they'll make such incredible breakthroughs through that. So yeah, anyway, I could digress on that for a whole nother session, man. There's a lot of growth to happen in there. And again, I think Texas is going to be like the heart of this psychedelic therapeutic revolution.
You know, it's interesting to your point, the more alternative, off the beaten path things. I think it's important to distinguish between things that may be operating at the placebo level and then things that are showing sustained growth over time. And because when people hear this, and obviously the veteran community can be a skeptical bunch, they may go, oh, well, I mean, come on, what is this hippie shit that we're doing here? And to your point, I get it, but there is no, when you're using a variety of different professionals all within the space, it's a bit more demanding, quote unquote, than essential oils. You know, you can't really, even though essential oil people will tell you their research or whatever, this is a integrated care team that's approaching a very specific model versus, you know, have some lavender, it'll ease your anxiety. And I don't mean to sound too,
you're gonna get so many nasty grams for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't mean to sound too snobby, but at the same time, these things need to be held to a certain empirical standard. You know,
you're right, and we can't be afraid to. We know. I mean, and that's to that point. Like we know, this is an ancient sacrament that, like, you know, these tribes have used for thousands of years. But scientifically, we can break it down and recognize that this is DMT with a myoinhibitor. You know, we can see the chemical compound of it. We know what DMT does. Your body creates DMT like crazy. You just absorb it immediately. The myoinhibitor slows down your absorption rate, which is what allows us, like, we can approach this. We know that this ancient sacrament has these intense medicinal purposes, and we can use it as a medicine. Like, it is a medicine that we can apply in a clinical practice to try to, like, actually help bring people to this right spot. There is no placebo to this effect. You know, this is like, you know, you're taking DMT with a myoinhibitor. Like, you're going to go on that journey. We can prepare you for it, and like we can get you ready for it, but now you know what you're getting into.
Right.
And I would be excited to see the greater community learn how to incorporate it more, so that we can, like, not, I don't know, live in fear of it. I think every new approach has had some trepidation and some fear before it's finally found, like, you know, the accepting crowd.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's true. That's true. I mean, there's always a little bit, anytime that something new comes out, there's always a bit of suspicion. Everybody wants to see your data. Everybody wants to verify you and generalize and, you know, replicate. But I know I'm going to get a ton of emails about this. There's no way for us to end this conversation without somebody not being like, wait, you should have got to this. And oh my God, why didn't we talk about that? So, if, you know, at some point we may have you back on if you're receptive to that, but tell everybody where, I mean, do you have a next speaking engagement that they can go and check you
out? So I think we're slotted to attend South by Southwest.
That's nothing, right?
Dude, I feel honored and blessed when some of these know, amazing people have reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to participate in this? And I'm like, you know, you're talking, you know, you called, right? It's the wrong number, you know. But we're going to go to South by Southwest. I think we're going to be bringing, you know, our setup, the VR setup, you know, the different stuff that we do down that way. We'll also be doing some panels on, you know, just because again, we could talk about, you know, plant medicine and psychedelic medicines and modalities all day long. Like, there's also just like the straight up clinical work. Like, like, you show up, we just do the straight clinical work, and we're good with that, and like that, and that works. You know, some people just benefit from those other things as well too. So we'll do our boost with like the clinical side of things. We do some speaking engagements on that and veteran treatments, and, you know, we're calling it like the PTSD renaissance, because I definitely think trauma and how we address trauma, like the trauma renaissance, like the way that we've addressed trauma and PTSD and everything else, like not separating the two, slumming them all together, and like not, and how we've applied it to veterans, like, oh, you're a veteran or you're a first responder, and they just take their clone stamp of PTSD and hit everybody in the forehead with it.
Yeah.
We'll be discussing that, and again, some of the other modalities as well too.
Yeah. So obviously everybody can find your website. You're linked to vetwithamic.com anyway. So if you guys are already familiar with our site, they're under the friends of the show. The Sheepdog Program is already linked out of vetwithamic.com. So is there any particular social media platforms that you want to plug while we're here?
Yeah,
I know that's not your guy. You got like a team for that, right?
I got a gal. She's been doing amazing for me. So there's the Sheepdog Program on Facebook. There's the sheepdogprogram.com. So yeah, those are the two main places to come look for us.
Nice. Yeah. So is there anything that you felt like we didn't get to that you would like to have talked about?
I think that was a beautiful shotgun scatter blast of like randomized things to discuss. We could probably do a full session about each one of those.
And that's what I'm saying. No matter how we end this thing, man, there's going to be emails saying, "Hey, you need to talk to that guy again," and I wanted to hear more about this thing or that thing that he talked about. So yeah, absolutely. If you're receptive to coming back, we'll do another episode here with Adrian. But if you've enjoyed this conversation and you feel as if somebody in your life would benefit from hearing it, please do us a favor, spread the word. Let everybody else in your sphere of influence know about the great things that are happening here on Vet with the Mic and the inspiring stories and the work that we hear every day here on Vet with the Mic. If there's a particular topic you would like to have covered here with Vet with the Mic, please reach out to me at ryan@vetwithamic.com. I will run down an interview. I will do whatever I can to make it happen. But in saying that, however life finds you, I hope life finds you well. Till next time.